This tomb you stand before is enormous, and it measures approximately 686 square meters in area. It was built as the eternal resting ground of one of Egypt's kings who ruled for an incredible 66 years. For over a century, the tomb of Egypt's youngest pharaoh has fascinated the world. But now, experts have made a stern line call on them: they will not open it anymore. Why is that? Speculation is rife of mechanical traps, rivers of mercury, and even of an underground kingdom buried below the earth. Dreamers and scholars alike have speculated about secret rooms, lost queens, and grand secrets knowingly hidden. Even writer Graham Hancock has suggested that there is more to this than the public is being informed. But this is not a story of curses or conspiracy. Rather, it is one so life-changing, so surprising, that it has polarized the whole community of archaeologists. What did they really find that convinced them to call off all subsequent expeditions? And why is Egypt so determined to draw the line? It is the real reason why specialists refuse to open further the tomb of Egypt's youngest pharaoh. It is the turn of the boy behind the mask now. Long before his was one of the most recognized names in human history, he was just a boy caught up in the turmoil of one of Egypt's most tumultuous times. His name was Tutankhamun, and although his time as pharaoh was short, what happened after he died would give him an immortal status forever. Tutankhamun became pharaoh about 1332 BC, likely between the ages of 8 and 9. He was, in all respects, a child king. His reign followed in the wake of the radical reforms imposed by his father, Akhenaten, the so-called heretic pharaoh who sought to undermine Egypt's traditional pantheon and substitute it with the sole worship of one god, the Aten, the sun disk. When Akhenaten died, the kingdom was in disarray. Priests were outraged, temples were empty, and the people were unsettled. Into this tempest of chaos stepped the boy king, influenced and advised by mighty counselors and senior priests. These individuals wanted to re-establish stability, not on the child's behalf, but in order to protect their own positions. Over the 9-year period of his brief reign, Tutankhamun unwound most of Akhenaten's radical reforms. He restored the worship of Egypt's old gods, relocated the royal palace to Thebes, and started rebuilding temples that had been left in ruins or desecrated. But aside from these actions, there is little to indicate that Tutankhamun himself wielded actual authority. All scholars believe that older administrators like Ai and Horemheb were actually in charge, taking great care to position themselves as probable heirs to the throne. Tutankhamun's health, on the other hand, was precarious and in doubt. Analysis of his mummified body reveals a youth who bore the weight of severe diseases. He had malaria, bone abnormalities, and quite possibly a club foot. He used a cane to support himself, and over 100 walking sticks were discovered inside his tomb, mute reminders of the physical struggles he had to face every day. His death, occurring when he was only around 18 or 19 years old, came suddenly and remains one of history's enduring mysteries. Some speculate he died from an accident, others suggest illness, and some even whisper of foul play. But without written records, the truth remains elusive. What followed, however, ensured that his name would never be forgotten. Tutankhamun's burial was unusual. Whether due to political unrest, insufficient planning, or just haste, he was buried in a small and unpretentious tomb, KV 62, which historians think was never originally meant for a pharaoh. Its dimensions were humble in relation to the large tombs of other monarchs, and its design felt unfinished. However, ironically enough, this same haste proved his salvation. Since his tomb was small and quickly buried, it was forgotten by ancient tomb robbers. For more than 3,000 years, it lay buried under rubble and subsequent building until November of 1922. That was when British archaeologist Howard Carter, sponsored by funds from Lord Carnarvon, unearthed one of the most remarkable finds in history. Under the sands of the Valley of the Kings, they discovered a staircase descending to a sealed entrance. Beyond it was a room filled with more than 5,000 objects, golden shrines, chariots, jewelry, statues, and most famously, the brilliant golden death mask that would come to symbolize our contemporary picture of ancient Egypt. For the first time ever, the world witnessed what a royal Egyptian burial was really like, maintained nearly as it was left thousands of years ago. Tutankhamun's golden mask, covering his mummified face, was more than a work of art. It was a statement to the world. In spite of his youth, in spite of his brief reign, and in spite of being all but forgotten in Egyptian annals, this boy king had been immortalized in world memory. But even after all the riches were documented, even after decades of research, KV-62 can still keep secrets. The unusual dimensions and layout of the tomb have vexed scholars for years. Some say it was intended for someone else altogether. Others believe that behind its decorated walls may be secret chambers, closed rooms that Carter never entered. And so, more than a century after it was rediscovered, intrigue still surrounds. Why, then, have professionals not torn down the walls or pried more energetically into those potential secret rooms? The question remains, full of suggestion. It is not ancient spells or superstition that hold them back, but a much deeper fear, the fear of destroying what has been preserved for millennia. For decades, Tutankhamun's tomb was believed to have yielded all of its secrets. Generations of historians and millions of visitors believed its mysteries had been fully revealed. But in 2015, that certainty was challenged. It began with something small, measurements, scans, and then grew into a theory that shook the foundations of everything we thought we knew about KV-62. It began when British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves scrutinized high-resolution images of the tomb walls with great care. What he saw was subtle, yet not to be ignored: thin lines, irregularities, and anomalies under painted plaster, especially on the north and west walls of the burial chamber. These lines hinted at something extraordinary: the probability of sealed doorways concealed behind the very walls that Howard Carter had reached 100 years ago. Reeves proposed a radical idea, that Tutankhamun's tomb was not a standalone burial chamber at all, but rather an extension of a much larger royal tomb. And if he was right, then the hidden chambers could potentially contain the burial of Queen Nefertiti herself, Akhenaten's queen and one of Egypt's most enigmatic women. Nefertiti's final resting place has never been found. Reeves had proposed that Tutankhamun, who had died so unexpectedly, was likely buried in a side chamber of what had been intended for her. The theory caught on like wildfire. Not only did the configuration of the tomb confirm it, but the very painting inside raised eyebrows even higher. The paintings in the burial chamber seemed hasty, with some figures painted over earlier outlines, as if concealing earlier representations. Even the proportions of the chamber, modest and utilitarian by royal standards, suggested a rushed improvisation. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities treated the theory with seriousness. In 2015 and 2016, radar scans and infrared imaging were performed using sophisticated techniques. The initial results looked encouraging. Japanese radar expert Hirokatsu Watanabe stated anomalies in keeping with voids behind the walls. Infrared imaging showed differences in temperature along the north wall, potential indications of concealed cavities. A thrill ran around the world. This would be the biggest find since Howard Carter himself if it were true. Media outlets went into overdrive with headlines and tourists clogged the Valley of the Kings, hoping to see history being made. But that only lasted until doubts crept in. Later radar scans yielded conflicting results. Some detected no voids at all. Others doubted Watanabe's methods. A third 2018 investigation by the Polytechnic University of Turin, employing cutting-edge equipment, proclaimed confidently, there were no secret chambers. Nothing was behind the painted walls. This contradiction hit the world of archaeology like a lightning bolt. Were the initial scans faulty? Misinterpreted? Or was something causing interference with the readings? The debate became heated. Some argued the scans proved nothing and warned that further attempts could irreparably damage the delicate plaster and ancient paint. Others maintained that even a single anomaly was worth investigating. After all, if there was even the smallest chance of Nefertiti's tomb, could humanity afford to ignore it? Yet, the risks were immense. A drill could cause fractures. A break could put ancient treasures at the mercy of rot in hours. And hanging over it all was politics, the fame of Egypt, its national pride, and the huge tourism industry that rested on its antiquities. Thus, the public split into factions. Some held fervently to the belief, others scoffed at the theory as fantasy. The media, once aglow with rumor, gradually fell still. KV-62 was still sealed. The concealed walls lay untouched. And the world was left to speculate. Had we been poised on the edge of a giant discovery, only to turn back? Or had enthusiasm blinded us to reality, that there was nothing left to discover? Whatever the reason, the choice not to burst through those walls was not easily made. It will require more than radar, more than curiosity, it will take sureness. And that, in the end, is why specialists declined to further desecrate the tomb of Egypt's youngest pharaoh. Why it is sensible. The tomb of Tutankhamun has lain open for more than a century, but its most contentious walls have never been disturbed. And now, with all the technology, surmising, and fantasy of secret treasure, the international community of archaeologists has reached an unexpected verdict. Leave it alone. The motives now laid deep within the hysteria are now clear as crystal. And when you consider the complete picture, it all fits into place. The walls in question, the north and west sides of the burial chamber of Tutankhamun, are more than simply barriers of stone. They are also covered in dainty paintings, plastered with dainty plaster, and sealed under conditions which have lasted for thousands of years. Even the slightest vibration, temperature shift, or drop in humidity, could cause sections of that art to flake off, never to be recovered. And the moment a drill pierces that plaster, the microclimate inside the tomb changes forever. According to Egypt's former antiquities minister, Khaled Anani, no drilling will be done unless we are 100% certain that there is a cavity behind them. That is, there is no space for hypotheses, no betting on ancient walls. Our current technology is great, but it's not yet accurate enough to ensure what lies beyond them, or indeed what harm may be done just attempting to discover it. Experts such as Aliyah Ismail, of the digital preservation team Factum Arty, have cautioned that even a small hole can lead to significant issues in the long run. If we poke a hole, no matter how tiny it is, it could start a crack in the wall and do a lot of damage, she explained. And it wouldn't be immediate damage at all. It would begin as a microscopic fissure gradually creeping over the years, silently ruining the very thing we are attempting to preserve. And then there's the issue of evidence, or lack thereof. Though early radar sweeps indicated probable voids behind the wall, the latest and most sophisticated scans did not confirm this. Without definite evidence of a chamber, drilling is a risky gamble for something that may amount to nothing. Skeptics, like Egypt's best-known archaeologist Zahi Hawass, have been most outspoken in their criticism. Hawass has spoken publicly, saying, "Why should we drill a hole and harm the tomb for a theory that few accept in a scientific context?" He's not wrong. If there were tangible, reproducible data leading to another chamber, maybe the risk is justified. But currently, the scans don't agree, and that's sufficient reason to keep the tools off the walls.